Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it was supposed to be a symbol of the UK's newfound independence from Europe. Late last year, the government proudly announced that after Brexit, the UK will switch back to the traditional blue British passport, which was replaced by the burgundy EU-style design in 1988. But the news today that the post-Brexit blue passports are likely to be made in France has prompted a furious response from Eurosceptics. The matter has already been debated in the Commons with some heated responses.
Can we please have a full statement on le passeport bleu? You can just simply feel the upset and fury from all these Brexiteers over there. How dare these Europeans get their mitts on our blue passports, this new symbol of a free Britain? Mr Speaker, forget Agincourt, forget Waterloo, forget Trafalgar. We must say no to these French passport makers. So will the Leader of the House join me in my campaign to make the British passport great again?
Well, joining me from Westminster is Andrew Rosindell, Conservative MP, Brexit supporter and chairman of the Flags and Heraldry Committee, and from Brussels, the Deputy Leader of the European Parliamentary Labour Party and Remain supporter, Richard Corbett, MEP. Andrew Rosindell, are you feeling the fury as well?
I'm pretty unhappy about this. The British passport is coming back. At last, we've got the symbol of our national identity being restored. Why is it, therefore, that we allow a French-Dutch company to be able to take the contract away from our own De La Rue, which is based in the north of England? Now, I don't think this is right, and I think that the government need to review how this has happened, particularly when you consider that the French do not allow British companies to tender for their passports. Frankly, there are times when you have to put the national interest before European procurement rules. And this is one of those occasions. The British passport, I believe, should be produced by British workers in the United Kingdom.
Richard Corbett, British passport should be made in Britain. Is that an important issue for you?
I think this whole issue is getting out of proportion. The fact that our passports are going to be blue, is that the most important challenge facing us with Brexit? We could have had blue passports anyway, because the EU provisions on this are only a recommendation. Croatia, for instance, has blue passports. You can choose whatever colour you want. And to seize on this as the great achievement of Brexit, frankly, is a little bit pathetic. It's perhaps because that's the only thing the government's managed to deliver so far, but it's pretty ridiculous.
Andrew Rosindell, is this ridiculous, out of proportion?
Oh, I'm afraid Mr Corbett and the Labour Party again have missed the point. The British passport's coming back because we're leaving the EU and we're going to have our own passport that's entirely controlled and produced by the United Kingdom, and yet, no, there's a lot more that's different about it. It's actually a sovereign British passport rather than saying European Union above United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland. So we're getting our passport back. It should be produced by British workers, giving British jobs to British people. That is what we should do, just as the French do. They don't tender the contract for French passports. They produce it in France, and so should we. A British passport should be produced in Britain.
Richard Corbett, that's not fair, is it? If France can choose to produce their own passports, but we can't, and they get all the work?
Well, in which case, under EU rules, if France could do it, we could do it. We didn't need to leave the EU to do that. Perfectly possible for Britain to do it. And when we say we're getting back our British passports, in law, these always were British passports. They're produced only to a common format, a format not laid down by the EU, by the way, but by international conventions. The only thing that's going to change is the colour, which we could have done anyway without leaving the EU. If this is what Brexit is about, then frankly, a lot of people are going to say, what the heck? What have we been told? What have we been sold? What a load of nonsense.
Andrew Rosindell, ultimately, does this not come down to value for money? And the figures reported, various figures, but around £120 million more cost to the taxpayer if the contract was awarded to the British firm. So how can you justify that?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm thinking of the jobs that we're losing in Gateshead, potentially. De La Rue produced the passport at the moment. Now, there are certain things that I think should be protected. I don't think everything should be subject to EU procurement rules. We're leaving the EU. In future, we can make our own decisions. At the moment, we abide by every single thing the EU says. France, of course, doesn't do that. They make their own rules as they go along, which is one of the reasons why we have to leave and we have to make our own decisions in future. But I do feel for those people that have... It's a flagship for De La Rue. They produce the British passport at the moment, and they're going to lose that contract. I hope ministers will think again. Look at what else could be done to ensure that the British passport is manufactured in the United Kingdom. If I were the minister for this, I would never sign this off. And I call upon the minister responsible to call this in, look at how we can reconsider what we do in this case, and look at ways to make sure that the British passport is produced by British workers within the United Kingdom.
Should we be doing everything we can to protect British jobs and British manufacturing, Richard Corbett?
Well, clearly not, because the British government could have done just like the French government does under existing EU rules and reserved this for a British company, had it so chosen. That is a British government decision. You can't blame that on Brussels or on EU rules. Other countries do it, so Britain could have done it likewise.
Regardless of whose decision it was, I'm asking you whether we should be protecting those jobs.
British governments have a duty to protect British jobs within the rules, and this could have been done within the rules. These rules, by the way, are rules we've agreed with other countries quite often to protect British firms that tender for jobs in other EU countries. But clearly, in this case, France has shown us that we could have reserved this particular job for our own companies had we so chosen to do so. But that was a British government decision by an incompetent, weak and divided government that doesn't know its arm from its elbow. In this whole Brexit saga, it seems not to have a clue what it's up to.
The reality is that a Labour government would never be taking us out of the European Union, so we'd be bound with everything to do with the European Union. The fact is that by leaving, we will get control of all these things in future. At the moment, we're still tangled up in all these EU laws and rules and directives,
now, as it turns
out. The French, as we know, ignore things that they agree to. We obey the law, and at the end of the day, we follow procedures, and it's going to harm British jobs. So I say to the government, and I say to the opposition as well, work together to ensure that the British passport stays in Britain and is manufactured by British workers. Now, why does Mr Corbett disagree with that? Is he against British workers getting those jobs? He's rather more in favour of letting the EU decide for us than he is for giving jobs to British workers.
Mr Corbett?
I think Mr. Rosindell must be hard of hearing, because that, of course, is not at all what I said. But when he talks about EU rules, there are EU rules that we have willingly joined up with other countries to say we need common rules on this. But passports, absolutely willingly, But passports are not one of them when it comes to the colour of the passport. You're free to choose your own colour. Nor is it necessary under EU rules to allow other companies from other countries to bid for that. France has shown us that it's possible to reserve that, if we wish to do so, to British companies. So all this froth from Eurosceptics saying, oh, we're regaining control from Brussels over our British passports, that's control we never actually lost, thank you very much. So stop pretending that it is.
I just wonder, then, Mr Corbett, what you'd say to those in Gateshead whose jobs are at stake now. What would you be doing differently?
Blame the British government. Don't allow them to make you believe that Brussels or the European Union is to blame in this particular case, because it's not. It's British decisions by the British Conservative government that have led to this situation.
No.
It's a Conservative government, therefore, that's to blame. The Conservative government could have done something about this, Mr Corbett is saying.
Well, I hope Mr Corbett is right. I hope he's right, and I'm calling today to the Minister to call this decision in. If there is a legal way that we can ensure that those jobs stay in Britain and that the passport is made in the United Kingdom,
even if it costs the taxpayer 120 million more pounds.
I believe that we should put the interests of our country first. The truth is that Mr Corbett has a lovely job in Brussels at the moment. He doesn't want to give it up. He basically loves being an MEP. He wants to keep his job. He wants to keep us in the European Union. I don't.
So you can tell when people lose an argument when they change the subject and attack the person like that.
Don't want to either.
You can tell
you've
lost the argument there, Andrew. Well done.
And they want the British passport made in Britain. Made in Britain, that's what we should be working for. And Mr Corbett should back me in calling the government into reviewing this decision so that the British passport remains a British product.
Richard Corbett?
Well, had you been doing your job as an MP, you might have called on the government not to put it out to tender in this way in the first place, rather than complaining and shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Had you been doing your job as an MP, you would have done that. Instead, you come here, you make bogus arguments based on things that are not correct, and then when you're losing the argument, you revert to attacking the person that you're debating with rather than discussing the facts. I think that's
Mr Corbett, I'm not attacking you at all, personally. I just think you should support what I'm saying.
You just did.
Are you supporting what I'm saying, that the government should draw this matter in, look at it again and find a solution so that we can keep those jobs in Britain? Do you agree with me or not?
I think you should have said that before the government put it out to tender, not after it's already done so and after the contract's been awarded. That's a big failure on your part.
But you would rather keep us in the EU altogether so that every contract has to go through this process so that we don't actually side with in Britain's interests.
Okay.
That's exactly what you want, because you want to keep us
I don't think I can see any end in sight to this argument. Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed.
I've been